know, we have our sessions every Monday at 9:30 p.m. Unfortunately, my co-host Mojo won't be with us today, but guess what? You still got me. So let's get started, guys. Thank you again for joining. You're watching the Container Chat with Mojo and Jessica. The goal of this program is to educate you guys about shipping container life. So, what it means to use shipping containers, how to properly use shipping containers, but more importantly, the benefits of them. It's an educational series that's designed to help you guys understand what all goes into it and how, if you wanted to invest in the container life and start your very own projects, you'll be able to do so very easily. So, with that, today's topic, I wanted to talk about, really, to be honest with you, the customer experience. And so, a lot of times when people are looking to get into the container life, we are looking at, you know, apples to apple comparison. So, how is this life, so to speak, or this type of construction very similar to the traditional construction? So, I want to go over a couple of differences, explain them in detail, and then also answer any questions that you guys may have, of course. So, with that, let's get started. So, I'll start with traditional construction. So, traditional construction is typically what they call stick built. So, that means that the frame of the house is built out of wood, and then you have your other traditional materials that's used within that construction process, right? All right, cool. So, that's simple enough. Now, the other side to it is the container life. So, those who don't know what the container life is, it's actually the use of shipping containers, typically what you see sitting on a port as you're driving past the waterways, so to speak, that are just stacked pile high. You know, we use those shipping containers in our construction process. And so, how that differs from traditional construction is you go from a stick built home to a steel built home. And so, the container is made out of steel, and that's what makes it different, and that's what makes it special. Another key difference with the shipping container is, from the shipping container perspective, is the product itself is a lot more durable. So typically, when someone is using a container, they are typically using it in a respective construction. And so that means that the wood that you're using in your stick built construction is used the same way as is being used in the container construction. So wood versus steel. Outside of that, I think a lot of people think that using container and using green construction is significantly different as far as the methods go. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So for one, when you're using a stick built construction, typically you use the wood as a frame, then you have your plumbing, your electricity, and you'll have all your other major systems, your HVAC. And so that does not differ in the container world. So I think a lot of people have this mindset of, oh, this is significantly different as far as the processes that we use in green construction versus traditional construction. So I want to dispel that myth. It is not different. Everything that we do in container construction is the same exact way in traditional construction. And why is that? It's because it's up to code. It's the same thing that needs to be had in doing building so that it can be up to code, safe, and habitable by humans or animals for that matter. And so a lot of people have this tendency to believe that you use containers and everything that we do in that whole world is significantly different, and it's not. And so I just wanted to have that piece out there because a lot of people don't realize that container construction can be a really awesome thing as soon as you understand. And so that's exactly why we do what we do. This is the purpose of this particular podcast, Container Chat with Mojo and Jessica, because the goal is to help us be able to educate you guys through your questioning, your comments, and being able to help people from a perspective of understanding this world to see if this is something that you think you may want to get into. And so that's what this is all about. So with that, let's keep going. So typically in a traditional home, you may use your traditional HVAC system. So So I'll break down the systems and then I'll go into, some of the other things as far as the installation of the products. So from a perspective of HVAC, meaning heating and ventilation and air conditioning systems, there's not a significant difference there either, other than with a container, if you were doing green construction, you're going to lean more toward more sustainable practices. So that means that the products that you use, the materials that you use, and the overall construction of that home or commercial structure, you're actually going to be very careful in what you place in there. So oftentimes in green construction, we're using what we call our energy saving products. And so oftentimes in our particular construction practices, we're using split units. So what's special about split units is you can put a split unit in multiple rooms to allow for the passing of that air, so that heating or the air conditioning, to be able to actually use it in a way that, to be honest with you, allows for each person in the home to control. And so you're probably wondering, why is that important? I'll go into that next after I talk about how most traditional homes are built. So back in the day, I grew up in Philly. Shout out to Philly. And we actually my home had radiators. And so behind the I call the grate that covers the radiator is a metal mechanism that has water in it, and it's attached to the plumbing of the home, that when you turn it on, it heats up much like a tea kettle. And while it heats up, the moisture or the heat goes into the air, and that's what makes the heat. So that's an old school home. Then when you start moving forward to the new school homes, typically they have what they call a central air system or ducted HVAC system. So what that means is your heating and your air is being passed through that home through your ducts. So most people, central air means that you have ducts throughout your house. It's going to every room. You usually got your vents either on the ceiling or on the floor, and that's how air is and the heat is passed through. In a traditional home, back in the day, it may be an air conditioner unit in your window. And so with that, that's kind of how it is on that side. So just imagine, and I know the first home I bought was a 118-year-old house. I was crazy. I love old houses. I like the character. I like the traditional wood. And so my very first home was 118 years old. It had radiator heat, and I used to have to use air units, and we actually had ceiling fans in the house. And so why did I say all that? Because with the stick built home, those are your options. You either want to have a wall unit or a window unit for air and sometimes heat, because sometimes those machines have a dual purpose, or you'll have old school, which is radiator, of course. But what's special about the split units is much like how you have, and some homes do have what they call our baseboard heating. So those are electric units that you kind of put on the bottom of the wall, or sometimes they're up on the wall, where that heating system is what kind of permeates through the house. And again, it's all individually based. Sometimes it can be connected to the whole house. Now, in the container construction, the reason why we use the split unit is because the split unit actually allows for each room to have its own temperature. It makes it a lot easier to heat and cool the home, because that split unit can serve dual purposes as well, have heat, have cooling. And so what I noticed, and I actually had an apartment that had a split unit, and I was really excited and impressed by that, because I can run both of my split units at the same time in that apartment that I had, and my electricity bill was never over $30, $40 a month. However, when I used to live in places where there were central air or even radiator heat, as I mentioned, even baseboard heating, my electricity bill would be through the roof. Sometimes I remember $400 or $500 a month. And so the reason why we, from the container perspective, we focus a lot on, energy efficient appliances as a way to not only lower the impact on Earth, but honestly, it's through the electricity use. And so by using these electrical units that are energy efficient, it allows for you to save money, over time. And so oftentimes when you're using a split unit and these type of build outs, it saves the customer money. And because it's energy efficient, it's not running as much. And especially with how a person, if you're going to build a container home, how it's built really makes a difference because your insulation is important. And so we can talk about insulation now. And so, from a perspective of a traditionally built house versus a green construction built house, insulation is super important. So, typically, if we go from the raw moving forward to moving backwards to go forward, you start with your foundation. Your foundation is no different in a traditional home than it is for a container home. So that's a lot of times people really want to know, like, what is it that I have to use for the foundation of my house. So before you even build, you have to put your foundation there. And so a lot of times people are wondering, it's just a slab. You could put rebar in it for, some extra security, but to be honest with you, when you're doing green construction, you don't have to make it complicated because you want it permanently affixed. Because when it's not permanently affixed, that's where you have issues with insurance. That's where you have issues with getting appraised. Because when it's not permanently affixed, they consider it a mobile home. And so you don't want a mobile home. And as big as and heavy as those containers are, you do not want to get that far. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, they tell me it's not considered real property. So remember, if nothing else, when you just start from the foundational things and doing the build out, remember that if it's permanently affixed, it's considered real property. When it's not permanently affixed, then it's not considered real property, and they actually consider it a mobile home. So you don't want to do that. So outside of that, we talked about the foundation. Now let's talk a little bit about the insulation. So we talked about the difference between the two types of frames. So we said the traditionally built home is stick built, the green construction or the container home is steel built or metal built. And so those are the two differences. So once you figure out your basic foundation, which is your literal foundation, and then you go to what do I want to use for my framing, now you're going to look at now your insulation. So we'll talk about insulation in the easiest way. I don't like to make things complicated. And so when we're talking about insulation, insulation is what keeps your house cool. Insulation is what keeps your house warm. And so you're probably asking, what does that have to do with anything? Well, what I will say is a couple of things. The difference between traditional built and green construction built is typically there are ways for a green construction company to find higher R value insulation. So the R value tells you the thickness of the insulation. So in this instance that we're talking about now, when you're trying to make your house efficient or make your house a little cooler, a little warmer, typically a lot of people, once they kind of get their stuff going, they don't really look much at over time how with a traditionally built home that the insulation ages. So what that means is the older your home is, the longer that insulation has been in there, and as a result, it diminishes or it breaks down. And so oftentimes when you have a home, either you purchased it or sometimes even when it's built from the ground up, I'm just being honest because I'm just coming from a construction perspective, you find that these homes don't have the highest R value insulation in it. So what that means is, as you notice over time, your home electricity bills, utility bills in general, seem to be really high because sometimes some homes have electricity and gas. And so with that, here's something to think about. Whether you're doing green construction or whether you're doing traditional construction, go for the highest R value. That's the thickest insulation. Do not skimp on insulation when you're doing a build out, regardless of how you're building it, because what I'll tell you is that in the long run, your customer's gonna be mad at you. They're gonna be mad because they look at it like, I spent all this money to build this house and it's cold in here all the time, or it's hot in here all the time, or I have to keep my electricity bills high because I have to keep my utility, your electricity, your HVAC systems, your heat, your air systems on all the time just so that it can keep its temperature. Insulation, what you choose about your insulation is, to me personally, is equivalent to how you build in your foundation on your house. So you build what's best for the home and not what's cheapest. And by doing that, you'll find that a lot of your projects will have a lot more merit to it. Your customers will be more satisfied. And overall, if you design your projects with your customer in mind, you'll always put that at the forefront. And so that's insulation. So remember, get the highest R value possible when you're doing your insulation on a container home. The next thing is, from your installation, you now are using whatever your walls are going to be. And so let's talk about that for a minute. So we talked about foundation, we talked about framing, we talked about insulation. The next step is going to be your walls. We'll get to floors and all that other stuff later. I'm just trying to go around the whole house so you guys can understand this. So from a perspective of drywall, here's something to think about. Depending on the climate that your home is being built in, it's very important to understand what you're going to use for the walls. So, for instance, in our construction company, we use something called Smart Steel. So, what's special about Smart Steel is it actually has steel, it has R49 insulation. So, that's the R value, it's 49. And in between, it's sandwiched in between those two pieces of steel. So if we never even use the container, we're still in green construction because we use something called Smart Steel. So with Smart Steel, what makes it special is that Smart Steel replaces ceiling walls and floors. So when we get back to what we just talked about, the wall, a lot of people go cheap on drywall. Why don't you want to go cheap on drywall? Because the thickness of your drywall, and I'll get into the two types that technically are out there in a minute. The thickness of your drywall actually determines, again, when we talk about energy efficiency, the thickness of your drywall really makes a difference on how the home actually, it kind of goes together, okay? Thank you, Pat. I'll answer your question in 1 second. We have somebody on YouTube asking a question. And so with your drywall, something to consider, and it costs a little more, is to think about using either commercial drywall in your container build outs or waterproof drywall. And the reason why I say that is because the thickness. So typical drywall is pretty thin. I can't go into, I'm not going to make it complicated and go into measurements, but it's thinner than the commercial drywall and it's thinner than the waterproof drywall. Something to think about, which is commonly happening when homes are poorly constructed and water permeates through at least one crack somewhere, that one drop that it may have infiltrated and penetrated that system can turn into something very ugly for homeowners. And so with that, you have to remember that you get what you pay for. And so that one drop of water, not only is it going to destroy your insulation in a traditionally built home, but it's also going to destroy your drywall. And typically when you have water damage from either the roof, so make sure you take care of the roof. We'll talk about that later. But that water damage, you typically got to cut that out and start all over again. But what people don't realize, and because I used to be a public adjuster, here's a tip for you guys. When you have water damage in your home from your roof, or let's say from a sink leaking or some other kind of water damage, I don't know, it can come in through the mortar of the bricks. Keep this in mind. You need to rip the whole wall out. And so a lot of times when people have these insurance claims, these emergency preparedness companies will come through and they'll cut, halfway the wall and they'll turn the heat on. And as if that air is really circulating like it's supposed to. It's no different than when you take a drop of water and you place it on a piece of paper or on the a paper towel. The water goes into the fibers of that particular material and it kind of spreads. And so oftentimes when people have water damage in their house, they don't really think about that. They just say because that emergency company comes in to tell them to cut it out, that it really makes a difference. But here's the issue. When you are replacing a whole wall, unfortunately, there could be mold in there, and now you're breathing it in. And a lot of people, and y'all know we mentioned this before, a lot of people are allergic to their homes. So be careful with the drywall that you use. Waterproof is great. because obviously it's waterproof. So if water hits it, it doesn't react the same way as traditional drywall does. And commercial drywall is both fireproof and waterproof. So now you got double protections. So Pat, thank you for your question. Ms. Pat Hvac asked on YouTube, she says, I'm learning so much. Does the insulation also prevent vibration and a hollow sound throughout the container home? Yes, it makes a difference. So commercial grade drywall, if you're going to use the drywall, actually helps with soundproofing as well. When it comes to insulation, again, the thickness assists in removing the sound barrier. So you'll go into a house that has, I would say, not so great insulation, not so great drywall, and you could talk just like this and you can hear everything. Whereas, and you know how you ever been in a place that has like acoustic hearing, so you may go in a place with lots of echoes, things like that, and that's because it's too much space, space for the sound to vibrate off of. And so to answer your question, Ms. Hvac, yes, it makes a difference. It prevents the vibration. It kind of turns, depending on the insulation and drywall you use, it actually helps with the soundproofing, waterproofing, and fireproofing. So go ahead and spend that extra money to get a thicker insulation. Go ahead and spend that extra money and buy better drywall if that's what you're going to use. Again, in our construction, we use Smart Steel. Smart Steel is wind, water, and fireproof, mold proof, everything. It's closed cell. It fits together like puzzle pieces. So our situation is a little different. Again, we're a green construction firm, so we focus on sustainable products. So that Smart Steel serves as that one thing for everything. And when you go to a Smart Steel and container home, trust me, you can feel the difference. You can hear the difference. The whole experience is different. And so that's kind of why we educate you guys about looking into other products outside of what you're traditionally using in your construction practices, because there are some things that are better out there, especially for the long term. So we build with the long term in mind. And thank you for that question, Pat. Melanie, thank you. I see you're here on this Clubhouse chat with us. So here's the next thing. So from the drywall, so we talked about foundation, we talked about your insulation, we talked about your drywall. So the next thing we're going to talk about, we can go to flooring if you want. So a lot of times with these container homes, and I'll just focus on container homes for right now because with traditional construction, they usually have a subfloor and they usually have some other kind of flooring, and then they add, whatever the floor is going to be. With the container construction, what makes it great is we actually do something similar where there is a subfloor, but oftentimes most containers already come that way. So that cuts out a step if you're going to use that same material. But keep in mind, you have to know what was in that container in order for you to keep the flooring. And so oftentimes you may replace that flooring just for safety reasons because you don't really know what's in there unless you ask about it. So remember our last call, we had an awesome guy, David, on here to explain to you guys how to choose the right container as far as like the quality, as far as the brand awareness of the company that you're buying the container from, all of that. So he gave some really good information. And so keep that in mind when you are looking at how to kind of, I would say, get into that purchase process, know exactly what you're getting. So that goes to the questions of what was in the container so that you can know whether or not you actually want to keep that particular floor or not. So what's great about that is, even though, and I'm going to say this, even though it has a floor, all containers have floors in it, right? You still want to do some extra stuff to it. So you want to sanitize and try to treat the floors, of course, because sometimes they look really good if you're able to do a good procedure on them, maybe, sand them down and kind of the same way you would redo a wood floor in a traditional home. And so outside of that, make sure you insulate the floors as well. People don't realize that even though the container comes with the floor, it doesn't have insulation. So if you took a container and flipped it upside down, there's nothing there. So there's nothing under it to protect the floors from the heat, the water, the air, and everything. So keep that in mind when you're doing your process, that it's not something that you can just say, well, I'm just leave the floor there. No, you probably need to take that floor up. You probably should treat it. You definitely should put some insulation in it, and then you can say that floor is done. And then you can add whatever type of flooring you want on top of that. So some people actually leave it the way it is, while others may not. They may actually go ahead and add some kind of wood flooring, some kind of vinyl, or whatever you think is beneficial to your customer based off of their design. And again, that's not much different in traditional world, depending on what it is that your customer wants, that's going to determine exactly what you want to have happen. So just keep those things in mind. The flooring is not significantly different from traditional to containers, but it's definitely important to understand what it is that you're doing and want to have as a design for the end product. So that's the floors. Now we're going to talk about the ceiling. We can talk about the ceiling and we can talk about the roof at the same time. So, okay, thanks, Pat. Pat has another great question about the floor. She said, is it safe to install heated floors? Yes, it is safe. So that's another great practice, actually. A lot of people, in order to save on energy, use heated floors. And so I'm not going to go deep into that today, but I will say that heated floors is a great way to kind of, again, when you're talking about permeating heat throughout the house, some people typically use them just in bathrooms, but I've been in houses where I just loved it. My feet were warm everywhere. I was like, ooh, this is so nice. I hate wearing shoes, so that's a win for somebody like me. So with that, yes, you can install heated floors. It is safe. Again, it's all about technique and it's all about design. So just choose your design wisely, and you'll be able to easily use that product, and it benefits the end user, whether it's yourself or your customer. And so when we talked about ceilings and roofs, something to take into consideration. So traditionally built home, do thing. Most people don't always insulate their roofs. I don't know what that's about, but if you have an attic, for instance, like in a stick built home, I don't see why I don't see more insulation. Again, I was in public adjusting. And so our job was to go from the ceiling all the way to the floor to do inspections to check for damage. So whether it was wind damage, water damage, what have you. And I noticed that every house that had an attic just never had enough insulation in it. So when you go up there, if it was the summertime, it felt like a sauna. And if it was the wintertime, it felt like, it was just freezing. And so keep that in mind when a lot of times when people are kind of, I guess I would say, from a perspective of them wanting to do this process, I don't know if they always take that into consideration that oftentimes that they're trying to kind of, I guess, from a perspective that you know it's not about cost savings. I know this is considered with an unused room, but if you have an attic in a home, I don't think it's wise to not have insulation up there if it's a traditionally built home, right? From a container perspective, typically there is no attic, there's nothing, above it. And so what I will say is that a lot of times when people don't understand how to properly insulate the area between the ceiling of a room and if there is a roof, because oftentimes the container, again, just like the floor, the ceiling of a container does not have insulation. So those are things you can't skip. But again, and the same thing for the wall. So if someone doesn't know, and if you're listening right now, just know a container, how you see it is exactly what it is. So it's still ceilings, still walls. The floor is made out of wood typically, but under that, there's nothing there. So you don't want to start building and not know that, because now, again, when we talk about saving money, and not just that, you don't know if for some reason or another, whatever had previously been in that container could have pierced the steel. And so we had a situation where we did a build out, and my one of the workers didn't check, and then the ceiling started because that's what we do first. We usually check for holes. So You could do that very easily by just shutting the doors, turning the air on, and using soapy water to spray on the container, and you can see bubbles. Just like if you had a flat tire, you kind of do that soapy water test to see if there's a bubble or a hole, so to speak, or air being let into a tire. We kind of do the same thing to check, and they didn't do that. And we did a whole build out, and we left one day and came back. The drywall was all wet. It was terrible. I was like, what is going on here? So somebody dropped the ball, and we had to go back and take some extra steps. And so we ended up having to go back and spend like a few more $1,000, just literally like 2 or 3 thousand, to now coat the container because they hadn't done that, and they also did not put the facade up yet. So luckily that was towards the end, and even though it was minor damage, but we were able to correct it before it was finalized. And so those are things to think about. So definitely check the roof. I know it sounds crazy, but my partner, Ibrahim, shout out to him, he will jump on top of the container in a heartbeat to check the roof. He's like a little animal. He jumps up and he climbs up it so quick, and he's looking all on top. So needless to say, those are things that you have to be careful of as well. You don't want to put money into something, and then the first day it rains, all your money literally drains down. So you don't want those situations. So the ceiling, walls, and floors are simple things: insulated, coated. They have waterproof, all kind of waterproofing material. So don't, even before you put insulation in, you can actually waterproof the inside before you do that, and then add your insulation, your drywall, if that's the route you're going, or whatever other reconstruction process you want to use. So don't think that, I don't have very many options. You have plenty of options. Pat asks, can solar panels be used? Absolutely. So we'll talk about energy now since you brought it up. So as far as now, we just want to take traditional construction all the way out of the conversation. Let's just focus on green construction, shipping container processes. So green construction wise, and again, green construction is defined by the eye of the beholder. So it may not be the same for me as it is for you. When you're talking about solar, what makes it very nice is that solar can be a great way for you to have additional cost savings in the green construction world. And so using a shipping container along with your solar panels actually will allow for you to very easily save on, again, electricity depending on the efficiency of the solar panel. And again, I'm not going to go into solar panel because that's not my specialty, but I will say it makes a difference the type of panel that you use. So when you're shopping for solar panels, make sure you're shopping with a reputable company, because not only do the quality of the solar panel make a difference, but also the installation process is unique. That's something that for those who are looking to get into, you have to be very careful with, because you can't just say, well, I want solar panels, and then you go buy a solar panel kit, and I see a lot of crazy stuff. I don't want you guys to do that. And so with that, please keep in mind that no, you don't want to do it the traditional way where you think you can do solar yourself. So you go out, you go buy your solar kit, and you start installing it. It can be improperly installed. I will not say it's unsafe, but if it's being installed on a roof or something, it can be unsafe, because if it's not properly secure, it can fall off and hurt somebody. So yeah, from that perspective, definitely. And something to think about with solar as well is when you're using solar panels, keep in mind that depending on the area that you're doing your project, and ask yourself, is it going to be worth it for solar? Because one side of it is that the area that you're using it is, if it's typically cloudy, you're not going to maximize the use of a solar panel. So solar is going to be best used in places that have constant sun. So without the constant sun, you can't really tell how exactly that solar panel is absorbing its energy, because remember, the sun is what kind of drives the solar panel. And so the more sun it has, the more energy it stores, and the better efficiency is for you and what you're doing. And so with that, please keep that in mind. You want to make sure that if you want to use solar, that you're using something that's going to help you be able, from your perspective anyway, to do some really great things. So, with that being said, I'm really excited, to be able to help and assist with that side of it, because I want people to be able to kind of look at it from a perspective of how can I start getting into this very easily, and by being able to get into it, it is a great way for you to save money on your overall construction costs. And so, with that, without that, just keep in mind that everything that we're trying to do is from a green perspective. You want to be able to kind of focus on the things that matter. And if you're very in tune with your client, you want to make sure that you're doing things that's going to allow for your customer to benefit from that whole process. Outside of that, you should not be building from a perspective of strictly how much money can I make of this. So with that, let's talk about some other things in relation to that. So again, we always give you guys a great tip on how to make money from the container life, right? So one thing is, I will say that from that perspective, once you have done your first project, I will say that you're pretty much an expert, because I'm telling you, the first one we did, we made more than enough mistakes to to take one for the team. That's all I'm going to say. And so, if you're doing your first project for the first time, I would just take your time, write your plan out. Definitely use professionals, because what I'll tell you is, when you're not using, I would say, not so much the engineering as much as you need an architect. The architect is really going to help you plan out this whole process, because they'll let you know where you got to make your holes at, and for doors and windows and all of that stuff. So we can talk about doors and windows very briefly, but the main part of doing these build outs is reinforcing your openings, so that will be wherever your doors are going to be and wherever your windows are going to be. And typically in a stick built house, the reinforcement is done by wood. Whereas in a container home, it will behoove you to do it with steel. Now, the reason being is, if you're going to move that home, or let's say, so we do off-site builds. Let's say that you build one in one location and you have to take it to someplace else. In order for it to keep its durability and strength and safety, if you hadn't reinforced the doors and windows, but you install doors and windows, meaning the glass is physically in there, that could be something terrible if it's not properly reinforced. And so please keep in mind that if you're going to do windows and doors in your container build out, that you use proper procedure in order for you to secure the doors and windows, especially if you have to move it. You don't have to move it, you're fine. So let's just say wherever you built it at, that's the final resting place, and you're okay. But if not, then you have to move it from one location to the next. And it's very important that you reinforce your doors and windows. So with that, doors and windows can be any size you want them to be in a container, and that's what makes it special. Typically, in subdivisions, when traditional homes are being built, all the houses got the same windows in the same place and all that. That's boring. Let's go for, something more fun. Funky size windows, sliding glass doors, maybe the whole side of it is all glass. There's a sliding glass door. Do something special about it. Like, don't even worry about, just going the traditional route. Maybe one or two windows on one side and all that. Go for skylights, whatever. Just get creative with it, guys. And when we talk about making money off of this, when you do your first project and you get the first one under your belt, now you can show it off to the world. So let's just say you want to get all the way into development. Let's just say your first build out is your model home, which I suggest everybody do. If you're going to get into container building, build one house for it to be your model home, and then you stage it properly, invite the media, invite your politicians, invite people who you think may possibly want to purchase one from you, and show off your work. Show them what you're working with. Tell them how great you did with this project. Show it off, take pictures, do videos, get a real estate agent to come in and get some real estate photography done. Go ahead and take them pictures and start pre-selling your homes. Okay? Because let me tell you something. Back to the subject at hand, container life. If you're about that container life, a part of being about that container life is being able to showcase it and show people that, hey, this is a great, viable option for people who are looking to do build outs in homelessness, build retail stores, co-working spaces, stadiums, you name it. The container can be used for anything. So all you have to do is get one under your belt and you're winning in these streets. You know, all you have to do is just do one. And once you do that one, you can bring everybody in, showcase it. You know, it makes the most sense. And this is something that I had not mentioned, but it makes the most sense to make sure that you have a building inspector come in and take a look at it. Because if this is your model home and you're going to duplicate this model home, you want to make sure it was built right. Okay. So sometimes you want to bring them in throughout that, code department and throughout that process to make sure that everything you're doing is up to code for your county. So don't skip that part. And I apologize if I didn't even mention it because I know I didn't mention it. That's very important. So go ahead and have those conversations with planning and zoning and coding. Let them come out and see your work. Get the stamp of approval from them because if they approve it, that means you in. All you need to get in is step one, and from there you're able to do all these different projects. So please, please, please do not skip that part. And I'm sorry that I didn't mention that at first, but you don't just say I'm a part of this container life and just start building container stuff. No, you have to go and do a couple things. And we're a general contractor, so it's not like we're random people having these conversations with you. No, we actually are licensed. And so if you're unlicensed and trying to do a project like this, definitely I would say consult a professional. Of course, you are more than welcome to reach out to us at shippingliving.com, or you just make sure that you have somebody in your corner that can help you. So, an architect would be helpful if you knew a structural or mechanical engineer that would be helpful. You don't want to do it alone. This is not a me project, me doing it alone. You definitely want to have some good people on your team who can help and assist in kind of all the layout. Your architect is going to do your floor plans. Your mechanical engineer can help with the assistance of all the moving parts within that building. And then your structural engineer, especially with doors, windows, and if you're, doing multiple floors and all of that, they can assist and help with that. So please use the professionals because that's what we are here for. And so with that, we're going to start wrapping up the call in about 15 minutes. And so, what I will say is a lot of what we are doing in this container life is stemming around trying to create, innovative products that can solve our longstanding issues, with housing and retail space and housing affordability and availability. This is, as we mentioned before, is a great way to do Airbnb. So if you're in real estate and you're just trying to expand your portfolio, doing Airbnbs is a great way to go. Starting to encourage more people to do retail spaces with them. Open your first pop-up shop. Whether it's a farmer's market or a retail for fashion and accessories, you can get creative. If you got land, I mean, the possibilities are endless. One of the things that you can do, you don't need to just focus only on, I just want to build my house. Yeah, you should build your house, but how are you making money off of it? You're spending your own money on yourself. Whereas if you think about, I can build my house and maybe another house for rental income, we talked about accessory dwelling units before, then that's another way for you to bring more income into your house. So let that rental unit pay for your house. Airbnbs, if it's a container house, as Mojo has said plenty times before, that's $200 a night, easy. And she said most places that she's had conversations with owners have been sold. They're sold out for years to come. So imagine you never having to worry about where your money's going to come from, despite pandemics and all that stuff. Invest in yourself. And a lot of people have recently been coming to us for is they're taking the equity out of their traditionally stick built home, and they're actually taking that money and they're building an extra unit on their property. And I even had somebody who hate their stick built home so much that they're asking us to demo it and replace it with a container home. And so, not just that, Another way for you to demo it and replace it with a container home is if you have enough space to have more than 2 units on a property. So we know some senior citizens whose homes are really big. They can demo the home and actually put multiple units, maybe up to 6, depending on the size of the lot, so that they're able to get all that rental income and they have a smaller space. So as our aging community is starting to experience, you know, not wanting to walk up and down stairs and clean out gutters and all that stuff, this is a great way for our aging population to be able to have rental income. So outside of their security, Social Security and pension, but they also can have a smaller home where they're able to kind of move into it and not have to worry about it. But even if they didn't knock their old home down, they can still build a second, smaller home on there, live in that second, smaller home, and rent out the big house. So there's so many different ways that yourself and your family members can capitalize off of container usage, very easily, just being creative. Another thing we talked about before are grow pods. So let's just say, it's not affordable to build a whole house. Maybe you can build one grow pod, and with that grow pod, you can supply your neighborhood with fruits and vegetables, and that's another way that you could be making money off of your property, using a container. And so just think about it from a perspective of how creative can I get where this one product can do so many things. And for me, the possibilities are endless. And so with that, I'm going to bring our conversation to a close. By all means, y'all know we're here every Monday and Thursday from 9:30 to typically 10:20, 10:30. And we answer your questions. We try to educate you guys on topics that we feel are important, but feel free to DM us anytime and let us know things that you want to hear. And then we'll be back again on Thursday explaining some of the same things, which allows for you, allows for you to be able to learn even more. So we come up with different topics that, to be honest with you, are like, I would say, frequently asked questions by our customers. So a lot of times people ask questions and they're like, well, Jessica, what about this and what about that? And these are ways for us to educate you guys without you having to go through a full consultation. And I know a lot of times, it's not the easiest thing to do to find information online about this stuff, but just know it's available. You can confer back to the internet, for things that we're talking about to make sure I know what I'm talking about, or Mojo knows what she's talking about, or anybody who just pops up and wants to speak knows what they're talking about. So with that, we appreciate you guys. Everything that you guys do for us. We have been awarded Best of Georgia for construction, and we appreciate you guys. Mobile Enterprises, we are so grateful for our container life people. Like, you guys are doing some great things. Y'all took the time out and y'all voted for me for almost 2 months. Me and my team said, "Oh man, we won." I said, "Yeah, I didn't know what was going on." So we were excited by that. So thank you all for making us Best of Georgia in construction. And we are super grateful. You can see us online at shipfingliving.com. Right now, we're streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. Again, same username at Shipping Living. Or you can look us up in Mobile Enterprises, MOBU Enterprises. You can follow me on Clubhouse, Just CEO1. Then you also have Mojo. Mojo knows with a Z, not an S. And she's the owner of BlackBoxQueens.com. And you can see her online on Facebook as well. And guess what? We are here for you guys. So any questions that you have, comments, we have a lot of great conversations on here. Feel free to reach out to us anytime and just say, hey, I need to know this. And if you need that question answered right away, we will happily answer that question. And thank you, Pat. We appreciate you as well. And we want to be able to help you guys in a way that you're taking this information and you're getting into this container life. We want you to be able to easily understand what's going on so that when you are moving towards doing container construction, that you actually know what you're doing. We don't want you to fail, and that's not what it's here for. So if you don't use us, use somebody who knows what they're talking about so that you can have that very, very stringent guidance, because using containers is different in that it's metal versus wood. And if you're not doing that part properly, you could be messing up some things. So structural integrity is very important with these containers. So you can't just say, I'm just going to build it and I'm not going to reinforce windows and doors. That can turn into something very ugly. And we want you guys to be safe. So I hope you all enjoyed this lovely call this evening. I appreciate you guys. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, anything in between, feel free to reach out to me or Mojo. We'll answer your questions. Shout out to Mojo. I'm sorry you couldn't be here tonight, sis. I hope you're safe. I look forward to talking to you soon. And thank you guys for listening and watching. And look for our reality TV show. It's coming very, very soon. And if you need to listen to these, we're on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, you name it, we're on it. You should be able to find Container Chat with Mojo and Jessica very easily. All right, guys. So I hope you guys have a good evening and peace and blessings. Take care, guys.